This is Josh White with JW Math Tutoring, and today's video is going to go through Module 1 of Practice Test Number 1 for the new digital SAT that can be found in the Bluebook app. So I'm going to go through all 22 questions that are in the first module of this practice test, including showing how to use the onboard or on-screen Desmos calculator to solve a fair number of these problems. But keep in mind that for some of these problems, I will show multiple methods that you can use to solve them. So this practice test will most likely not be completed within the required time limits for this section. But I feel it's better to show as many methods as possible, especially on some of the more difficult questions, so that you can figure out which method is easiest for you to use. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and get started.
But life is a dream the calculus could never predict.
Okay, so I'm signed in to the Bluebook app. I have brought up Practice Test 1. I've skipped ahead to the math section. Basically, it's called Section 2. This is the first part of it, which is module number 1. And I just want to highlight one thing that is different, which is for the grid-in or the student-produced response questions, where you basically fill in the answer, the non-multiple choice ones. You can now enter negative values, and there are also more total spaces for you to enter. So you can enter up to 5 characters for a positive number and up to 6 characters for a negative number. So basically essentially 5 numerical digits, and then if it's negative, you would add the negative sign onto that to make 6. And they have examples here, for example, of the proper ways to enter it. So 2/3 on the paper SAT, as a decimal was entered as 0.666 or 0.667. Now it technically would be 0.6666 or 0.6667. Okay, so just be aware of that as one kind of main difference on this new version, digital version of the SAT, versus the paper version. Okay, so with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started here, and I'll bring up the calculator and obviously talk about that as we go ahead and start looking at it. So here we have just a basic data problem. It says it asks you, which frequency table represents the data that's listed. So if we look here, we can obviously see that there are 4 4s. So there would be a 4 for the value and a 4 for the frequency, and then there are 3 8s. So the value would be 8 and the frequency would be 3, and there are 2 13s. Okay, so the value would be 13 and the frequency would be 2. As you start scrolling down through these answers, hopefully you recognize that it's going to be letter A. For this one, we don't even need to, scroll down and look at D. Notice the numbers, don't even make sense here. But for this one, correct answer is going to be letter A. All right, next question. We have x squared plus 3x minus 40. So most likely the easiest way to do this is to just go ahead and factor it. And you could either use the AC method, or if you recognize here, because the A term is 1, we know that this is going to be, x and x. And because the C term is negative, it's going to be plus minus. So we're really looking for factors here of negative 40, which add up to positive 3. So those two factors are going to be positive 8 and negative 5. So the correct answer for this one is going to be letter B. Now, alternate ways you could solve this problem if you were for some reason having trouble with the factoring or you didn't know that they were trying to factor this, you could go through these answer choices and you could just FOIL them all out, right? And then combine your like terms and see which one, when you do that, gives you x squared plus 3x minus 40. I mean, really, you're just looking at the inner and the outer terms because all of them are going to be x squared, and based on the signs, all of them are going to be minus 40. Now, just real quick too, to show you something in Desmos, a third way that you could do this is we could bring up the calculator over here, okay, and we could just type in the original expression. So we got x squared minus 3x minus 40. And then notice it crosses here at 5, 0, and it also crosses here at -8. That means these are the zeros, or the x-intercepts. Therefore, the way you would write this in this expression, and you could in what's known as intercept form, is it's basically like, x minus p and x minus q, where p and q are your intercepts. So you would go x minus -8, x minus 5, and the two negatives just cancel to make it positive. So this is an alternate method just to get the answer. Basically, it's an alternate method to use, where you can use the graphing calculator that's part of the test in order to factor. Okay, now looking at, we'll just get rid of that for right now. Looking at question number 3. So this is just basically a fairly straightforward linear equation, that you're going to set up. Notice that the 3 miles per hour deals with walking, and for the walking, they tell us he walks for W hours. So to get the total distance, we're just going to multiply the rate, or the speed, of 3 times his time, which is W. And then same thing for running, we're just going to multiply the rate, or his speed, of 5 times the time, which is R. And these are both distance values, and they're just going to equal the total distance he travels, which is 14 miles. So this is just going to be 3W plus 5R equals 14. And the correct answer for this is going to be letter A. Okay, next question, number 4, deals with some basic geometry. So we have a triangle here. We know one angle. We know second angle. What's the measure of third angle? Well, you can draw a picture, whatever, if it will help you. You can just label it ABC. Okay, B is 52, C is 17. What is A? But you don't have to do that, because all you're really doing here is just realizing that all 3 angles in the triangle add up to 180. So if you go ahead and do that, x plus 69 equals 180. X is going to equal 111 degrees. So that's a correct answer, is going to be letter D. All right, now here we have the next problem, number 5. Basically a situation where you have a line that's graphed out. This represents basically how much an electrician charges, y, which is the y value, for x hours of work. So he works this many hours. This is what he charges. That's what each point on this line represents. Okay, and it also tells us he charges a one-time fee plus an hourly rate. So what's the interpretation of the slope? The slope in a situation like this, a linear equation, is just going to be the hourly rate, because the slope is basically the rate of change. And what are we changing here? Well, we're changing the number of dollars that he charges, per 1 hour. So the correct answer for this is going to be letter A. Just one other thing to point out, the y-intercept would be the one-time fee. Like, in other words, that's how much he charges before he's actually done any work. Just so you know, if you have a question, similar to that comes up. All right, now we have a student-produced response question. This is number 6. Notice that for this one, they give you the whole thing that showed up when I began the section about the proper way to fill them in, and number of decimal spaces and all that good stuff. Okay, so here we have a table, and it's got a bunch of rows and a bunch of columns. It wants to know what's the probability of selecting a red tile. So notice that we have a total of 30 red tiles. There's 10 squares, 20 pentagons, so the total number of favorable outcomes, which is red tiles, would be 30. Total number of tiles we have down here is 100. So the answer to this question is going to be 30 over 100, which reduces or simplifies to 3 over 10. So notice you have 2 different ways you could put this in. You could do 3 division sign 1 0, or you could put it in as its decimal equivalent, which is zero point 0.3, or you could technically put it in as 0.3. Okay, all of these are correct and could be entered as your answers, for this problem. All right, back to the multiple choice questions. Here we have one from problem number 7. So in this one, you have a survey, and they tell you how many people were chosen, and so on. And okay, they tell you 35% of the people support this legislation. They talk about the margin of error, and then it wants to know what's a plausible, i.e., reasonable value for a total of people in the entire population who support the legislation. So basically, all we're going to do is we're going to take the total number of people. We're going to multiply it by 0.35 because that's the percentage that's supported in the survey. Okay, if you do that, you get 17,500. And then what you would do is you would just increase or decrease this value by the margin of error. Okay, the margin of error is 3%. So what we would do is first calculate the number of people that would be equivalent to the margin of error. So that would just be 3% of the 50,000, or 50,000 times 0.03. If you do that, you should get 1,500. Again, you can just do all this on the onboard calculator. And then you would just add that value to 17,500 and subtract that value from 17,500. Again, these calculations you just do on the calculator, or if you bring your own calculator, of course, you can do it on there as well. So that would end up giving you 19,000 for like the upper end for the within the margin of error, and it would give you 16,000 for the lower end. So plausible values would be in between these two numbers. So when you look at the answer choices, there's only one answer, letter C, which is in between these two values, and that's going to be 16,750. Okay, now we have for question 8 another student-produced response type question. So here you have a basic equation. Easiest way to solve this is to just go ahead and basically essentially like cross multiply. Like you can put the x over 1 and then you can cross multiply 55 times 1, which is just 55, and x times x plus 6. And then we could just get 55 equals x squared plus 6x, x squared plus 6x minus 55 equals 0. Now, two things. First of all, at this point, you can factor this to solve it. So I know it's going to be x and x. I know it's going to be plus minus because the c term is negative. So I'm looking for two factors of negative 55 that add up to positive 6. So they're going to be positive 11 and negative 5. That's going to give me two answers, negative 11 when you set each of these parentheses equal to 0, and positive 5. They want the positive solution, so we cross that out and we get 5. However, here's an alternate way to solve this. So you could, once you get to the point where you've got it equal to 0, just bring up the calculator, go ahead, graph the function out over here, and now look for basically its x-intercepts. So if we zoom out here, notice there are two x-intercepts. But the problem says, what is the positive solution? So therefore, we don't want this negative 11. We want this one right here, positive 5. So it might be quicker and easier to just go to the calculator and graph it rather than doing the actual factoring. But you can get the answer right here, positive 5. And so then you would just type that in and move on. All right, now back to another multiple choice question for number 9. So for this question, it gives you a situation, and it's basically asking what type of scenario is this? Is it increasing or decreasing, and is it exponential or linear? So notice that first of all, it says that the airplane is descending and its altitude is going from 9,500 feet to 5,000 feet. Okay, so its altitude is going down. Therefore, it will be decreasing. So get rid of this, get rid of this. And right after that tells us that it's decreasing at a constant rate of 400 feet per minute. This is the same as, say, subtracting 400 feet from its altitude every minute. Or in other words, you're subtracting a specific value. That's going to be a linear situation. So this is going to be letter B for number 9. In exponential situations, the decrease is by a certain percentage or a certain multiple. Okay? Whereas linear, the decrease or increase, if it was an increasing example, is going to be by a specific value or specific number. All right, now in the next problem, number 10, we actually do have an exponential function here. And it wants to know what the y-intercept of this graph is. So again, there are two different ways you could solve this. So you could just plug in 0 for x, and then recognize that 1/12 to the 0 power is just 1, and 11 times 1 is 11. Therefore, the y-intercept is 0, 11. Answer choice A. Or you could go to the calculator, and again, you could plot this function out. And then we could see exactly where does it cross the, the y-axis. And we can see it's going to be right, if you like trace here along it, okay, right here, 0, 11. That is the point which has an x value of 0, which means it's on the y-axis. So that's going to be our answer, correct answer, letter A. So again, two different methods you could use to solve this problem. All right, next up, number 11, we have a geometry-related question. So they tell us that the circumference of the circle is 144 pi. P, R, and SQ are both diameters, meaning O is, they go through O, which is the center of the circle. Okay, and they also tell us the length of arc PS is twice the length of arc PQ. So this might be 2x, and this is x. All right, so now a couple other things we know. The arc PQ will be equivalent, congruent to the arc SR. The reason is because they both have the same central angle measure. So therefore the arcs will be congruent, as well. And the same thing is going to be true with PS and QR. They both have the same central angles in here. So therefore they're going to have the same arc values. Okay. Now it wants to know what is the length of QR. So all we have to do now is basically set up an equation where we add up all these values and then set that equal to 144 pi, because that's the total distance around the circle. That's your circumference. So you basically got 2x plus x plus 2x plus x equals 144 pi. And then we're going to get 4x plus 2x equals 144 pi, or just combining them all, 6x equals 144 pi. Just divide both sides by 6. And for the value of x, if you don't know what 144 divided by 6 is, it's just going to be 24. You could, again, go to the calculator on screen and do it on there. So correct answer is going to be letter A. Also want to point out that you could do this one by using back solving. And what I mean by that is take the answer choices, plug in the values, and see if it equals the 144. And basically what I would do is I would ignore the pi. So for example, if I started with answer choice A, what I would do is I would say, okay, this is 24, this is 24, this has to be 48 because it's 2 times that. This has to be 48. Add up all those numbers on the calculator. Does it equal 144? Now it turns out the answer is yes, so you have your correct answer and you move on. If it didn't, then you'd move on to the next answer choice and you'd plug them in and figure out what the arcs would be, and then add them all up and see if they equaled 144. But that's just an alternate method you could use to solve this problem. Okay, next problem is number 12. Basically, it's a word problem involving a rectangle. So if you just, sketch out a picture here, one side is x, one side is 15 less than that side or that x. The area is 76. So we know area for rectangle, length times width. And here we know the length times width is just going to be x times x minus 15. So we get 76 equals x squared minus 15x, or x squared minus 15x minus 76 equals 0. Again, on this problem, you could factor it. It's going to be, or you could use the calculator. I'll show you how to use the calculator in a minute. It's going to be plus and minus, and the factors are going to be negative 19 and positive 4. Those are the two numbers that multiply to give negative 76 and add up to negative 15. So we get x equals negative 4 and x equals 19. Of course, we throw out the negative 4 because you can't have negative values for a distance or for a length. So that means x is equal to 19. Correct answer for this problem is going to be letter B. Now again, the way you could use this is you could bring up the calculator and just put in x squared minus 15x minus 76, and now again you're looking for the x-intercepts. So you might have to zoom out here. Okay, here we have a negative value. That doesn't help us. We only want positive values. So right here it is, 19, 0. That means x equals 19, and that's your answer. Again, could be quicker, could be easier than factoring it. So just keep that in mind. All right, next problem, number 13. You are given some values here, basically years and dollars, and it tells you it's an exponential relationship, and it wants to know which equation below represents, the relationship between t and n. So there's multiple ways you could do this. You could subtract the difference between the first two values, and you could see what you get for that number. So, for example, I'm going to go to the calculator. Okay, and we have 606.42 minus 604. Okay, so we get $2.42. Now you could divide that by the starting amount, okay, of 604. Clear this out. Okay, it's 0.004. So that tells us that basically the interest rate earned here is going to be 0.004, or technically it's like 0.4%. So that tells us that for an exponential equation, we're going to be looking at 1 plus 0.004 inside the parentheses, because the general way that an exponential equation is set up, it's like 1 plus r. So we're now down to A and D are out. We're down to B and C. And it's going to be choice C because notice the starting amount is 604. Okay, and that matches the general form in exponential where the initial amount is out here in front, then you have 1 plus the interest rate, and then your variable t or x or whatever up here. Okay, that's kind of the traditional way that you would solve this or figure it out, but here is a much easier kind of way, and this is basically going to be back solving. So let me just clear the screen. All right, so what I would do is I would take 0, I would plug that in for t, and then I would see which of these things is equal to 604. So if you don't know or can't just do it in your head, that's fine. I would just go to the calculator. So I would type in for the first one, 1 plus 604 to the 0. Does that equal the $604 we expect? No. Okay, get rid of it. Now I'm just going to make it, for choice B, 1 plus 0.0004 to the 0. Okay, does that equal 604? Nope. Get rid of it. Now for choice C, notice I just have to add the 604 in front. Okay, that matches, so that should be correct. But I'll check choice D just to be sure. 0.0004 times 1 plus 604 to the 0. Okay, that is not equal to $604. So as you can see, just by typing a couple of numbers to the calculator and using back solving, we can just also confirm that the correct answer for this one is letter C. Okay, question number 14. Here we have two lines, and it wants to know at how many points do these equations intersect. So, multiple ways you could do this. One way you could do this is obviously you could set them equal to each other and solve for it and see how many values of x do you get. It's either going to be, basically it's either going to be 0, no solution, or it's going to be infinite solutions, or it's going to be 1. You know, it's not going to be possible that it's 2 or 8, for example. So if you do that, you know, just notice, okay, x is equal to 20 divided by 7. So the correct answer is going to be 1. There's only one x value where they intersect, and so on. But an alternate way you could do this is, again, you could go to the calculator on screen. Since these are both in slope-intercept form, you could just put them both in here, x plus 20 and 8x. All right, now I need to zoom out a little bit. Okay, how many points do they intersect at? Well, we can clearly see it is 1 right here, 2.857, which is 20 over 7. Therefore, correct answer is letter B, 2, and that's it. Nothing else to do. All right, now for number 15, we have another, student-produced response. So you're given this situation. You're given this, this equation up here, and basically it represents like how many points or whatever student got from green tokens, and how many points the student got from red tokens, and combined together they add up to 380. Okay, and they want to know, okay, how many more points is a red token worth than a green token? So if you look at this situation, hopefully you recognize each green token is multiplied by 5, whereas each red token is multiplied by 45. So that tells us each green token is 5 points. Each red token will be 45 points. So how much more is a red worth than a green? Well, it's just 45 minus 5, just 40 points. So we just grid in 40. That's it. That's the answer. Nothing else to do on this problem. All right, question number 16. Here we have another exponential equation situation. Tells us we have 44,000 bacteria to start, and which represents the number of bacteria, okay, for this thing where it doubles every day. Okay, so there's multiple ways you could figure this out. Kind of the straightforward or the traditional way is, well, you'd recognize 44,000 is the starting amount, so that has to go in front, because the basic, like exponential equation, you could say it's like a equals, 1 plus r, whatever, to the t, right? A here is the initial amount or the starting amount. So that's going to be 44,000, so get rid of a, get rid of b. Okay, now the amount will be doubling. So that means it's going to be multiplying by 2. So that means this whole like 1 plus r term is really going to be equal to the number of 2. Because you're going to because the double means to multiply by 2. You're just going to keep multiplying by 2 after a day, after another day, after another day. So the correct answer here is going to be letter D. Notice C has technically 1/2. So in C, it's actually going to be decreasing. Now, I do want to mention an alternate way that you could get this is you could go ahead and you could do picking numbers. So you could say, okay, after 1 day, okay, we would expect it to have doubled 1 time. So the 44,000 would go to 88,000. And then you could go through all these answer choices and you could plug in 1 for t and go to the calculator on screen, and you could see which of these equals 88,000. Now, what's going to happen is the first one is not. It's going to be 22,000. The second one does equal 88,000, so we keep it for now. The third one equals 22,000, so we get rid of it. The fourth one also equals 88,000. So at this point now what you technically would have to do is you would have to like redo it between choices B and D. So maybe you like let t equal 2, and now the 88,000 is going to go to double that. I think it's going to be 176,000. And so now you could plug in like t equals 2, and if you go ahead and do these answer choices, you're going to see for A, it's not going to be anywhere close. It's going to be extremely larger because 44,000 is going to square, and then it's going to also be multiplied by 2. So this one's going to be eliminated, and you're going to be just left with choice D. Again, all those calculations can just be done on the calculator that's on screen, but that's an alternate method to use to solve this, which is basically the idea of picking numbers. All right, next up, problem number 17. Here we have a cylinder. We are given its diameter and its height, and it just wants to know what the volume is. So, you have a cylinder here. Okay, we know its height is 12. We know its diameter is 8. All right, all the way across. That means technically its radius will be 4. Hopefully, you have the volume of a cylinder, formula memorized. It's basically just, pi r squared h. It's just the area of the base, which is a circle, and then multiplied, by the height to give it the third dimension. So you could just plug those in. So it's just 4 squared, which is 16. 16 times 12 is going to be 192. So the volume for this cylinder is going to be 192 pi. Therefore, correct answer is going to be letter C. All right, next up we have problem number 18. This is again another problem that could be solved on the calculator or you could do by hand. I'll just briefly show you how to do it by hand just to review solving systems of linear equations, but you don't need to do it that way. You'll see on the screen it's going to be so much faster to do just using the calculator. So I would do elimination and I would multiply the bottom equation by -3 because that would turn the first term into -6x so that it will cancel. Then we get -6y and -30. So now when we add, we get 1y equals -2. So really not that much work to do it by hand, but the correct answer for this one is going to be A, -2. Now, to show you, if we go to the calculator here, now we could just type in both equations. The problem is, actually no, there won't be a problem. We can see on this calculator, we can actually enter them in standard form like they're given, unlike say your typical graphing calculator where you would most likely have to enter them in slope-intercept form. Okay, so where do they intersect? Looks like right here, 7 comma -2. So what's the y value? Well, it's -2. Answer choice A, and that's it. So again, probably quicker to do it on the calculator, but you can also, of course, do it by hand as well. All right, now we're up to problem number 19. This is a basic kind of trig problem. So there are multiple ways that you could do this. So first thing I would do is I would draw a picture. Okay, so we have a triangle. They tell us J is a right angle, so we've got whatever K here and L here, right? We know the cosine of K, so here's angle K at the top, is 24 over 51. So that means the adjacent side right here is 24, and the hypotenuse would be 51. They want to know the value of cosine L. So what you could do is you could go ahead, and there's multiple ways you could do this. And I'm going to show you, 2 different ways to do it. So one way is to just use Pythagorean theorem and do 24 squared plus, we'll just call this x squared equals 51 squared. That's going to give us the value of the third side, the unknown side here. So I'll bring up the calculator and I'm just going to do 51 squared minus 24 squared. Okay, I get 2025. Now I need to square root that. Just clear this out. 2025. Okay, so the third side is just going to be 45. Okay, so again, this whole thing was 2025. X equals square root of 2025, 45. Okay, cross this out. 45. Let's get rid of that. Okay, perfect. So now you could go ahead and say, okay, what's the value of cosine L? Cosine L is just going to be its adjacent side, which is 45, over its um, hypotenuse, which is 51. Now, you would not enter the answer like this. You would need to reduce it, simplify it. So this is going to reduce down to 15 over 17 because there's a common factor of 3. Okay, so that's one possibility for what you could grid in. You could do 15 divided by 17. Notice we have 5 characters, which matches. You could also divide this, and if you do that, so if you do 15 divided by 17, notice it's 0.88235. So you could also enter technically 0.8823, meaning you truncate it, or you can enter 0.8824, i.e. you round it. So either of those would be acceptable. Now, an alternate way that you could do this is you could find what the actual angle measure for K is, and this you would need to do. Let me just see. We could do it here on the calculator. You don't need a graphing calculator. Okay, so here's how you could do it. We know the cosine of, let me just erase some of this to get it out of the way here. So again, this is using basic trig, kind of like basic trig properties to solve it, not Pythagorean theorem. So you know that cosine k is equal to 24 over 51. So if you do the arc cosine of that, so now we can just go into the calculator and we can just calculate this. Now, one thing to be aware of is that the default for this on-screen calculator is radians. So you need to go up into the settings here, the little wrench icon, and make sure you change it to degrees. Okay, so make sure you click onto degrees before we actually input this. So now we just go to functions, inverse cosine 24 divided by 51. Okay, and we get 61.927. So that means k is equal to 61.927. That means L is just going to be equal to 90 minus that. So we could just go ahead over here. Just do 90 minus 61.927. Okay, L is 28.03. And then we could just take the cosine of that. Now, one thing we do want to be careful with, so let's do cosine of, what was it? Well, I could just put it in the 28.073, I think. I could do 91 minus 1.927. Okay. Notice I get 0.88234. So this one you could enter in 0.8823, and of course that would be correct. Now, ideally, if you were going to do this, I mean, you would want to carry over the exact value. Okay, so if we want to carry through the exact value, what you're going to have to do is kind of actually think ahead and basically do the whole thing in one step. And so by that, what I mean is you're going to do the cosine of L, but L is 90 minus the cosine of K, or excuse me, 90 minus the value of K. And the value of K is technically the arc cosine of 24 divided by 51. So right here is how you get the exact, value that we had when we do the 15 divided by 17. So just keep that in mind. Although as long as you go out to at least 3 or 4 decimal places, it should be close enough that it will be an acceptable answer. Okay, problem number 20, we have another student-produced response question. They give us a function here. They want to know where it reaches its minimum. So there are multiple ways we could do this. We could first of all find negative b over 2a, which is going to be equal to the h or x coordinate for the vertex, and that's basically going to be our answer. So that would be the opposite of negative 50 over 2 times 4. That's just 50 over 8. That reduces to 25 over 4, which is also equivalent to 6.25. So you could grid in 25/4, you could grid in 6.25. Both of those would be correct. Now, the alternate method is, of course, to use the calculator and just graph out this function and see exactly where the minimum value occurs. So, okay, going down here, and you can see like right here, y is negative 30, then here y is negative 30.25, and then it goes back up again, to negative 29 point something. So right here, 6.25, this is going to be the x coordinate where it has its minimum value. All right, question number 21, another student-produced response question. So in this one, basically, we have a line which goes through the origin and it's parallel to this other line, y equals 8x plus 2. And this line then all goes through the point 3 comma something, and they want to know what's the y coordinate that is associated with the x coordinate of 3. So this one's really actually not that difficult. The slope of this y equals 8x plus 2 line is just 8. And since the line L is parallel to it, it will also have a slope of 8. Also, since it passes through the origin, you think about it, y equals mx plus b, it's going to be y equals 8x plus 0. Or in other words, line L has an equation of just y equals 8x. So now all we have to do is plug in 3, and we can see that the y coordinate associated with that is just going to be 24. So D is just going to be 24, and that's it. No other work to do on that one. Once you know the equation is y equals 8x, I mean, you could go to the calculator, you could graph it, and then just go to where x is 3 and see that it's, y value is 24, but it's really not that much quicker than just plugging in 3 and multiplying 8 times 3. All right, the last question on the first module of this math section from practice test 1. Okay, here we have the equation of a line, and it intersects this parabola at exactly 1 point. They give us the equation of the parabola. They want to know, okay, what's the value of c for this line? So multiple ways you could do this. The first is you have to realize that when you have a parabola, quadratic function that's either going to look like this or like this, for a line to intersect it at only 1 point, it will have to intersect it at the vertex. Okay? And this is also going to be a horizontal line. So it's either going to be like this or like this. Now, so the intersection point is going to be the vertex, is kind of what I'm getting at. Now, we know that this parabola will open down because the a value here is negative, because there's a negative 2 in front of the x squared. So it's going to be this situation right here. So basically, what we need to do is we need to find the vertex of this parabola, and then the y value, i.e. k, its y coordinate, is basically going to be equal to the equation of the parallel line, except that we have this 2 in front of it, so that makes it a little more confusing. So here's what I mean. And I'm going to find the vertex by using the formula negative b over 2a, and then evaluating that in the function. So I take negative 9 and I divide it by 2 times negative 2. So I get negative 9 over negative 4, which is just 9 over 4, or 2.25. Okay, that's my h, that's my x coordinate of my vertex. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the calculator, and I'm going to evaluate the function at that value. Okay, so I get 10.125. All right, so that's my k value. That is the y-coordinate of the vertex. That means that the equation of this line, this horizontal line right here, is y equals 10.125. Okay? But notice the form that they gave it in was technically 2y equals c. So if you rearrange that, you get technically y equals c over 2. So what that means is 10.125 is equal to c over 2. So what is c equal? Well, it's just 2 times that. So I've got, if I just go back over here to the calculator, 10.125 times 2. So 20.25 is the value of c. And that's the correct answer to this question, 20.25. You could also technically, if you did everything in fraction form, you could do it. You could also grid it in as 81 divided by 4. Or again, as a decimal, it's 20.25. Now, just to show you, so steps like this that could have been done on the calculator include graphing out the parabola and getting its vertex values that way. So here I graph it out. Okay, I go all the way to the top here. I notice it's getting, it's getting bigger, 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 bigger. Okay, here's the top, and then it gets smaller, smaller, smaller. Okay, so you could get the 10.125 that way rather than doing all this work I did over here. But then you still do have to recognize that the equation is actually y equals c over 2, so technically this value would be multiplied by 2 to get the value of c. All right, so that's the last question on this first module from Practice Test 1 of the Digital SAT in the Bluebook app. If you have questions or comments, please leave them below. Otherwise, the second module, which there's actually two, parts to it. There's module 2A and module 2B. There's an easier one and a more difficult one. Those will be posted in the coming days as well.